My next guest has been one of the most ardent GOP critics of President Trump's tax and spending cut bill. Here with me now is Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Senator, I want to get to that in 1 second, but I do want to ask about what's going on in California. The president deploying 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles against the wishes of California's governor. His defense secretary says active duty Marines may also be mobilized. And during the 2020 George Floyd protests, you said you supported governors using the National Guard to maintain order, but you did warn, quote, you really don't want to send in the U.S. military. Would President Trump deploying active duty troops cross that line?
Well, good morning, Dana. Well, first of all, we have the experience in Wisconsin where Governor Evers refused to call it the National Guard, and he let Kenosha burn, and then President Trump sent in the National Guard, and Kenosha stopped burning. So the reason you send in massive manpower is to prevent violence. What we're seeing in California is violent, and unfortunately, you don't have leaders in California that are willing to prevent violence and protect federal law enforcement. This is all about protecting law enforcement as they go about their very difficult and very dangerous job. So I completely support President Trump in doing this because he does not have a partner in Governor Newsom or the mayor.
So there's the National Guard, federalizing the National Guard, and then there's a separate question, which has not happened, but the defense secretary tweeted holding out the possibility of Marines going in, active duty Marines to be mobilized. You would be okay with that?
Well, my guess is the National Guard ought to take care of the situation. It certainly did here in Wisconsin, Kenosha. Once they were deployed here, the violence ended. So again, you provide massive manpower to prevent violence. And I would be nice if Democrat politicians wouldn't keep stirring it up and keep asking people to go out there and protest against lawful law enforcement actions. That's kind of hard to stomach.
So the Marines you don't think should go in, or you're saying you don't think it would be necessary?
It won't be necessary. Bring the National Guard. That's what happened here in Wisconsin, and it worked. I'm quite sure it'll work in California.
You are, as I mentioned, one of the leading GOP holdouts on President Trump's tax and spending cut bill. It does include billions of dollars to improve border barriers, to expand immigration enforcement, the kind of thing that we're seeing in California and elsewhere. You just heard Senator Mullins say the situation in California shows the need to pass the bill quickly. Do you agree?
Well, first of all, Republicans are having to clean up the enormous messes left behind by President Biden. The open border, that's what's happening in California there. And of course, the massive deficit spending, which sparked 40-year high inflation. It's not easy. It's easy to be a Democrat. Just spend money, mortgage our kids' future, promise people, never deliver on the promises, never get held accountable by the media. So it's easy to be a Democrat. It's pretty hard doing what we're trying to do. So I'm a big supporter of President Trump. He's doing things that no other president would do that need to be done. As far as it goes, I'm a supporter of what's in the big, beautiful bill. My problem is it's just because it's so hard, it's not going far enough. And if we just pass this, if it's a one and done, we will not be really addressing the major problem here in terms of massive growing deficits and debt.
Not going far enough in that, right? You're not going far enough in cutting spending. So, but you do want to increase the spending on,
right.
On border and immigration enforcement?
Yes, that's the top priority of government, is to protect Americans, to defend our border, defend our nation. So unfortunately, the Democrats opened up the border, fled millions of people flooding this country, some of them violent criminals, violent gang members, members of transnational criminal organizations, human drug and sex traffickers. That's what President Trump's having to deal with. That's what Democrats left for us. So again, that takes money. And unfortunately, they also pretty well mortgaged our children's future with massive deficits. President Biden had an average deficit of $1.9 trillion. Obama, his last term, $550 billion average deficits. Trump had to do deals with Democrats, 810. Then, of course, we had the massive bipartisan spending spree in 2020, but we should have come down to a reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending and deficits. We didn't do that. The Democrats and President Biden just continue to spend. And again, now it's completely out of control. We can't accept this as a new normal.
You are, our understanding, Senate Republicans are considering changes to Medicare to offset some of the costs on the spending and tax cut bill. We're talking, of course, about a program used by more than 68 million Americans, most of them seniors. Is that something that you are, in fact, working on?
What we are trying to do is take a look at the abuses of the system that put at risk the benefits for the people who truly deserve them. For example, there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal written by a father of a 17-year-old autistic child who's on a 10-year waiting list for home care because he's being crowded out by single, working age, able-bodied, childless adults. That's what Obamacare did. And by the way, that's the part of Medicaid we're trying to reform is the Obamacare portion. Now they call it Medicaid Advantage. For every dollar the state puts into a procedure for a disabled child, the federal government kicks in $1.33.
So that's Medicaid.
For every dollar
what about
the state
Medicare?
puts in for a listen, because this is important.
Okay.
For every dollar the state puts in for a single adult childless, the government puts in the federal government puts in $9. That has led to all kinds of waste and abuse. There's upcoding inside of Medicare, which also is putting at threat the benefits for people that need it. So again, there is all kinds of waste, fraud, and abuse of these programs. That's what Republicans are trying to root out. That's what President Trump is willing to do. Democrats, of course, don't care. They just don't care about spending money and mortgaging our kids' future. This is hard what we're trying to do. I think in good faith we're trying to work together, but it's very difficult.
Before I let you go, you've had some pretty harsh words about this bill. You sound like you're warming to it as you have conversations. Is that a fair assessment?
No, I've had harsh words about the fact that we're mortgaging our kids' future, that we've incurred on average $1.9 trillion deficits, and we're going to incur another $22 trillion deficits over the next 10 years, and that's probably a rosy scenario. I've had harsh words for our current situation, and my only problem with this bill is it just doesn't go far enough to address that big mess.
And you're feeling like you're in a better situation with it now, based on the talks that you've had at the White House and elsewhere?
Well, nothing's really changed. I'll be sitting down with the White House economic team. I'm going to be I'm finishing up a report. I'll be issuing that next week that lays out exactly what this is. It gives different growth scenarios, showing how difficult it is going to be to grow our way out of this. I'm all for economic growth. We have to address spending. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and this bill just doesn't go far enough to address that problem.
Thank you so much for being here, Senator. I really appreciate it.